Hello everyone, I'm here today to do another video for my Warwick Prize for Women in Translation project. Basically I'm reading all the long list of the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation, and we are already in 2022, so we only have a couple more left. And in the list for 2022 I did read, I did attempt all of the books, but I DNF'd 2 of them. So not fully read, but I think I tried all of them, so I think that was a very successful year. Also in terms of rating, and the long list has a 3.0, which I think is maybe the highest that we have had so far, and the short list has a 3.21, which for me is very good because that means that I enjoyed fairly more than average. Average is a 2.5, so quite a long way from average. With that said, I have to say that most of the books in this list were kind of a 3-star thing, so like good books, but not like anything that I'm going to remember on the long term. But there were a couple of very good books, and one of them was a winner, so I was very happy about that as well. With that said, I'm going to go through the list of books from the one that I like the least to the one I like the most. So let's just start. The first one that I've put in the list is Things Remembered and Things Forgotten by Kyoko Nakajima, and this is one of the ones that I DNF'd. And it's not, like the ones that I DNF'd, it's also not that they were bad, I was just bored. So it's a collection of short stories with a magical realism touch, and they're supposed to be a little bit ghostly and a bit haunted, but for me, I was just not absorbing anything. It was fine for me. I was not absorbing the story, so I thought there's no point on me continuing because I'm not retaining anything. Next one that I have in the list is The Book of Mother by Violaine Huisman, I don't know. And this is about the relationship between a mother and a daughter. The mother was very toxic, and when she was hospitalized, the daughter decides to tell the story of the mother, and I found it very rambly, and I found it I was very bored. I only made it through the first part. It was divided in 3 parts, and I only made it to the first. I heard that it goes better after that, and I know that maybe in a different point in my life, when I had more patience, I would have gone through and I actually enjoyed it. That's why this is not my least favorite of this list, but honestly I was very done with the rambly nature of the book by the first part, so I didn't continue. The next book in the list is When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Solà, and this is about, it's kind of not exactly short stories, but it's very like everyday life of this village in the Pyrenees, and the language is very, very, very poetic, and if that's your thing, you would love this. I know a lot of people love this. For me, it was too poetic. It was so interested in how it was telling these stories that it lost what it was actually saying. It was not saying so much anymore because it was so concerned with how it was being said. So yeah, personally that's not my favorite thing in books, and so this one was not my favorite, but again, I know a lot of people love this one. The next book in this list is Why I No Longer Write Poems by Diana Ampimiadi. Probably butchered that. This is a collection of poems, which the cheek of calling this Why I No Longer Write Poems and then write it in poetry, great. But yeah, this is a very famous Georgian writer, poet, and she kind of talks about the big things that happen in everyday life, so not like the everyday life, but like the birth of a child or marriage or things like that, or like jobs and stuff, like the things that are big in a person's life but they're not big in the bigger world. And yeah, I think they were good. I think they were enjoyable, but I didn't find them very lasting, and I didn't find them that to be that I was connected to them, and maybe that's on me, but yeah, it was they were not super impactful for me. The next book in the list is Three Summers by Margarita Liberaki, and this is considered a classic of Greek literature. These books were translated in 2022, but they don't have to be from 2022. Sometimes they are from the 50s or something, so some of them are classics in the country they're from. And then this talks about three girls that were like, I think they're cousins or something, and they all went to this place in summer, every summer, and we follow them throughout like these three formative years, summers, so we never see them throughout the year, and it has a very nostalgic, cozy tone, and I understand why. I think a lot of people have this place where they just went to in summer. I know my cousin did, and sometimes I went with her to her village where she spent all the summers, and there is a very nostalgic thing about that, because at that point it's very important for these people to go there and to have these friends there that they only see like 3 months a year, but those 3 months are so intense that they form such strong bonds at that age, and that's kind of what the book is about, and we see them kind of growing up and like the bonds getting less and less strong, and I think it was I like that part of it. I like the nostalgia of that. With that said, it was fine. Like the story was not. It was nostalgic and it was nice to read, but that's all it was, kind of. So personally, I prefer to have a little bit more of something in my books. But with that said, this was a perfect example of that nostalgic thing of teenage summer in the village. And the next book is To Love a Woman by Diana Velesi, and these are poems about lesbian love mostly. There are also some about belonging, which are probably the ones I enjoy the most, and also it was interesting that they were written both in English and Spanish, like side to side, and I could see how the Spanish was translated to English, and that was super interesting to me. I really enjoy being able to do that, because I had read collections that were done that way, so the poems in the original language in one side and the English translation on the other side, but when I have read those books, I've never been able to understand the other side, like the other language, so that was kind of not interesting for me, but because here I could understand both, it was very interesting to see how translations are done. I think that was my favorite part of this book, actually. The poems themselves, as I said, they were fine. I like the belonging ones. The other ones were fine, but I like the ability to see translation. I'm kind of interested in how translations are done, and this had that aspect of it, which was very interesting. The next one is Planet of Clay by Samar Yazbek, and this is about a young girl in Damascus. And at the beginning of the book, it's very cute. She really likes the Little Prince, and she imagines the paintings and the Little Prince things everywhere, and it's very magical and blah blah blah. But as the book goes on, the war in Syria starts getting darker and darker, and so the story gets darker and darker, and all these Little Prince references start becoming really dark as well. And I really like how that was done. I think that was very good representation of how a war must feel. I can imagine. I've never lived in a war country, but I can imagine that's kind of how it feels. Like you have your life and things start getting unsettled until it completely explodes. However, there were also some parts of this book that I felt they were a bit manipulative, like emotionally manipulative. It had a very clear way that it wanted you to feel, and I didn't like those aspects of it, but other than that, I think the story was quite well done. The next one in the list is Brickmakers by Selva Almada, which is about two men that live I think they're neighbors. They live very close to each other, but their families hate each other, and therefore everyone is expected to be hating each other. And they have to work really hard to not make friends. Sometimes there is something that happens in the book that makes them confront themselves and the reasons why these things are happening. I thought it was fine. I know that the language is supposed to be very special, but it didn't come across in the translation. I'm curious if I would read it in Spanish, it would be more interesting to me. The next book is Men Don't Cry by Faïza Guène, and this is about a man that is from Algerian descent, and his family is from Nice, I think. And he has 2 sisters. One of them has just gotten into right-wing politics in France, and the other one has gone like the very traditional Muslim side of things, married, have children, all that stuff. And he is a teacher, a high school teacher, and he moves to Paris for an assignment, and he's kind of trying to find himself and at the same time dealing with all the politics within his house. Their sisters really don't get along with each other. The parents are struggling as well, and he just has to deal with all of it. And I found it quite interesting, actually. I think the dynamics of the family were very interesting, and also him trying to find himself. And also the school that he teaches at in Paris is not a very good school, so a lot of students have issues at home, and he's trying to deal with that stuff as well. And I thought it was quite well done, all the topics that is juggling. My main issue with this book actually was with the translation. There were some weird things going on, like there was a point in which Thanksgiving was mentioned, and it's France. I don't think there's Thanksgiving. I think that must be a translation thing. I don't know for sure, but very weird. Also, I read the audiobook, and the narrator has a London accent, which also was very weird. So some things like that about the production of the book I didn't love, but other than that, I think this was a good book. Then the next one is Slime by Susan Welditch, and this is mostly a non-fiction about all the slimy things in the world, and why slimes make sense, what kind of things are slimy, why we have the reaction we have to slimy things, and yeah, a little bit of natural history of the world kind of thing told through slime. I thought that the information was very well done, very well researched, very interesting. I found that the tone of the book was a little bit too hard trying to be funny, especially at the beginning. I don't like funny books, and that didn't appeal to me, but it washed off as the book progressed. And the other thing that I didn't love about this book was that it felt like a little bit disconnected, the things that she was talking about. So there was not like a very clear through line of the book, I think. But yeah, I think the information is something that I had never seen before, so I quite enjoyed reading something that I didn't know about. The next book in the list is Tom of Sand by Getanjali Sri, and this is one of the winners actually. There were 2 winners in this year, and this is one of them. It also won the International Booker on that year, and it is about an old woman that lives in India that is trying to get to grips to the life that she has. Her husband has just died. She's like 80 years old or something like that, and she is like trying to rebuild her life, and she meets this person and they become friends. It's a transgender person, so she has some conflicted feelings, and then at the end of the book we also talk about her connections to like Pakistan and what happened there with the Indian history. It was written very weirdly. It flew really fast. It's a big book, but it flew really fast because of the way it was written. It was very flowy. And it has a lot of good messages and good things that it's saying, and I think that it was a very interesting book. But when I read it, I was not expecting the weirdness, and it took me aback. Like, I thought it was going to be a completely different book from what it was, and so I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have. And that's the reason why I want to reread it, because I think I could enjoy it more knowing what to expect from it. I was expecting, I've never read Train to Pakistan before, but I was expecting something like what I would expect from Train to Pakistan, and I think it's completely different from what I was expecting. So I think that's why I didn't connect to it as much, or like the parts that I was expecting to like were not there, and yeah, I didn't have the best experience of it, but as I said, I want to reread it because I think knowing what to expect, I can enjoy this so much more. Then the next book in the list is Marzahn Mon Amour by Katja Oskamp, and this was very cute. I mean, also very hard, but very cute. This is about a middle-aged woman that is trying to build herself. Like, her kids are not needing her so much anymore, and she's kind of, okay, I need the life, and so she decides to become a podologist, so she studies for it, and then the majority of the book is her as a podologist talking to all her clients, and she works in Marzahn, which is a part of Berlin, and she treats mostly old people with calluses and stuff like that in this beauty salon, and she tells all the lovely stories of these people, but also like some of them are not as nice, some of them are Nazis or were Nazis, some of them were like nice people, there's a variety of things, and it's kind of like giving a voice to all of these old people of all the experiences that they have, and I think we don't give voice to old people as often as we should, and I think that's also something that came several times in this list, which I think it's important, and I just found it very very warm, and I really enjoyed the experience of reading this. I would highly recommend. The next book in the list is The Books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk. This is again a very big book. This is about this man from the 18th century around the east of Europe. So it goes all the way from Poland to Turkey, and he goes around and he goes around praying for his own religion that he came up. It's like a sub religion of Christianity, but he goes around giving the word of this new religion and blah blah blah, and he's a real man that existed, and we mostly follow his followers because he disappears at some point, and we mostly follow his followers trying to like figure out what he will do, what he will say, where he is, things like that. It's very humorous. It reminded me of the tone of The Life of Brian. If you have not seen that movie, I highly recommend. But that's kind of the tone of the book I felt, and even though I did not understand a lot of the history behind, because I'm not familiar with 18th century Polish history, I think it's still worth the read, and I think I did Google a lot of things while I was reading because I wanted to know more about this person, and yeah, I think it was very well done, and I really enjoyed the tone and the slightly sarcastic, punny dives that it takes at religion in general. So I really enjoyed that. I know it's not for everybody because it's very big, and I know a lot of people want to know the history before they go in. I found that interesting though. Like, a lot of people do praise Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, I think that's because they assume everyone knows that part of history. For me, they are, I know, well, I know a little bit more about English history, but basically my knowledge of both is more or less the same. And I enjoyed this one a lot more because I think that it does more interesting things at a literary level than Wolf Hall does. Wolf Hall, I think it's enjoyable when you know the history behind, but it relies on that a lot more than this one does. And then the final book on this list is Osebol by Marit Kapla. Again, a very big book, but it's also not very dense. It's told in little vignettes, and so Osebol is a rural place in Sweden, and we kind of follow the stories, if you want to say. It's not really stories. It's a real place, and this author went there and talked to the people. She's from there, and she talked to all the people, and this is kind of like a collection of the interviews that she took from each family and each house in this village. And it talks a lot about the current situation in rural areas, like how there is no jobs, how there is no schools, there is no hospitals, and at the same time a lot of people are getting older and older because the younger people are moving away, even the ones that don't want to. And so the older people are left behind, and they are trying to conserve the history of the place and the cultural relevance of the place. But it's harder and harder, and because they are old, they also have more needs, medical needs and so on, which are not easily provided in the rural areas, and it's all a very difficult mess. And then you have also recently a lot of places where they have basically just put the refugees in centers in rural areas rather than in the cities, and so you also have all these refugees coming there, and what the refugees think about living there and what the locals think about them living there. And it's very interesting. It's super eye-opening about how rural life is, because you obviously rationally can think about these things, but seeing it in interviews of how many of these little issues they have, and the details of how hard it is to live there, not just because it's hard not to have a supermarket around the corner, but all these other things that are basic things that make it really hard for people, even if they want to live there. And they are systemic. It's not just a choice that people make. They are systemic things that should be happening to serve the people that want to live in rural areas. And we do need people that live in rural areas, so we should take care of that. And this was very interesting, and it hit the nail on the head, and I really enjoyed. So yeah, those are all the books that were in the list of the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation 2022. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have read any of these books, if you have any comments about them, and until next video, bye!